Hello and welcome. You're on Strategic Insight on StratNews Global. I'm Nitin Gokhale. In the sixth episode of this series, we are doing in association with the United Service Institution called Strategic Insight. We are going to talk about the challenge that India can pose to China when it comes to air power, or vice versa. And what does India have in terms of air power when it comes to taking on China in along the northern frontiers, or even otherwise when the balloon goes up against China, or even otherwise, what is the deterrence that China can be posed by India when it comes to air power? And to discuss the relative air power that India and China have, and what India brings to the table when it comes to the Air Force, I have with me two distinguished air warriors, if I may call them. Air Marshal Anil Chopra to my right has flown a number of combat aircraft in his career, retired as the air officer personnel in the Air Force headquarters. And to my left, Air Marshal Anil Khosla, retired as Vice Chief of the Indian Air Force not too long ago. And of course, again, a combat veteran as far as flying missions are concerned. So let me turn to you, Marshal Chopra. When this Ladakh standoff has happened, and there has been a lot of discussion about how China has amassed land forces along the line of actual control, and it's also moved a lot of air assets to Tibet and Xinjiang. But then people have generally said that the Indian Air Force has both qualitative edge and edge in experience in air combat against when compared to the Chinese experience. What's your assessment?
Nitin, with your permission, I want to make one or two general statements before I come to the specific Air Force part of it. Deng Xiaoping, who was the person who brought the change in China, the economic reformation, he once said, hide your strengths, bide by the time, and thereafter take your calls when the time comes. Similarly, there is another gentleman who was the vice principal of the Communist Party school, who also said that it is in China's interest to have a multipolar world, because he felt that the power transition theory, which says that whenever there is a major transformation taking place in the world, like happened during Hitler's time, there is a high risk of people becoming aggressive or there being a war. Right. With this background, if you look at what has happened in the recent past, ever since Xi Jinping has come into power, he has centralized power. He is chairperson of everything. He has removed all opposition. He has removed collective leadership that was being practiced in the past. And when you take all the power in your hand, there are some dynamics which are being seen in the world. In fact, practically with every country in the world, China has an issue today. You see Japan, you see what has happened in Hong Kong. They are getting aggressive over Taiwan. They are having issues in Asian countries. They are having
even with Bhutan, tiny Bhutan.
and they are trying to meddle with a lot of other countries, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Myanmar. We know all that. But one thing which China did well is that in 1990s they realized, during the Iraq War, the dominance of aerospace. And that is when they started putting all their energies to aerospace, whether it's aircraft, whether it's aircraft carriers, whether it's space. So I thought this is important for us to understand that they have understood the importance of aerospace power, and that is the context in which now I am going to talk about what is happening in Ladakh. Ladakh is a peculiar area. We all know the great Himalayas, And we also know the constraints of terrain, our side, their side. We also know what are the air assets available with the Air Force in terms of airfields, this side or that side. So a war in Himalayas is going to be very, very peculiar. A dummy run of which we have already done in Kargil. So we have that big advantage that we have gone through a dummy run of the kind of war. But physically positioned today, there are three major airfields of China which are in that region, which are of interest to. One is Hotan, which is relatively lower, about 5,000 feet altitude, 350 kilometers from the area of action. That is where most of their PLAF and Pakistan Air Force exercises have been done in the past. A little farther away, about 600 kilometers, Kashi or Kashgar is what we call bigger airfield at a much lower altitude. And then Gargunza, which is not too far from Leh, about 200 kilometers. So these are the three airfields, and bulk of the action as far as Chinese are going to be concerned is going to be Hotan. Hotan is going to be made. In Hotan, we have already seen pictures, now OSCENT pictures that are available in public domain. They have got the H-6 bombers. They have, of course, H-6 bombers in greater numbers are in Kashgar. They have the J-7, which is basically a strike aircraft, and they have it in large numbers. They have the J-10, the equivalent of, which is a copy of the Lavi, which they have in significant numbers. And then they have got a series of other aircraft, which are J-11, etc., which are more or less the Su-30 class of aircraft. So this is what we are going to expect on the other side, J-7, J-10, and you say Su-30 class, MKI class of aeroplanes. On our side, of course, Leh is equivalent to Gargunza, similar height, more or a little closer, only 80 kilometers from place of action. But much larger number of airfields, which are within 350 kilometers range, the kind of range we are talking of in terms of Hotan, that side. And that means the entire belt of Punjab airfields, Adhampur, Halwara, Ambala, whole heap of Pathankot and big works. So purely in terms of number of airfields, we have phenomenally larger number of airfields. Our airfields, of course, all at, barring Leh, at much lower altitudes. Even Srinagar Avantipur is around 5,000 feet, which is same as Hotan. So therefore, we have a big advantage in terms. And the entire Air Force India is sitting in this region. Because this is the region, the Western Air Command region, which is looking after both Pakistan and China. And therefore, a bulk of our air assets are sitting over here or can be brought to bear over here.
Yes.
So therefore, we have this particular advantage. Mind you, we have got we are down to 30 squadrons, 29, 30 squadrons. Chinese have close to 80 squadrons, but the bulk of this Air Force is sitting on their eastern seaboard, because that is where a lot of action is taking place. So broadly, I have told you what is here. As we go along, I'll try and explain to you what are the areas where they are strong and what are the areas we are strong.
Right. So
and that I think will actually bring
what is the relative
bring out the relative.
Yeah. So I'll come back to you, but Marshal Khosla, what is the air power doctrine of the Chinese? You must have studied it. I mean, are they have they graduated from what kind of primitive air force that they were, say, even 30 years ago? Have they come to a certain class which India should be wary of, or what is the challenge that they pose?
Okay, thanks, Nitin. Thanks to you, sir, and you to getting me here and making me sit with my guru. And I don't know why we're sitting this way. You could have come here and I could have gone there. I've been following you for years. You could have answered these questions much better than me. Okay, coming to the point before, I'll just put one thing in perspective.
Sure.
One is, we keep talking about two front. Earlier days, the people used to think that all the military people call two front just to justify their requirements and needs and to put the force behind it. It is facing, it is in our face.
Now we are faced with.
And it's not two front, it is 2+2. If you include the internal security situation in the north, in the east, and the center, as well as the COVID situation, it is 2+2 front.
Correct.
It is facing, it's a wake-up call for us.
Yes.
If we don't wake up now and do something corrective action, I'm afraid in the future we're going to have mud on our face.
Sure.
That is one. Secondly, as far as China is concerned, if the EPA, like Marshal Chopra has already summed it up, if I have to sum it in one sentence, I would say quantitatively they are ahead of us. Qualitatively, like he said, somewhere we are ahead, somewhere they are ahead. Right. But overall, they have overtaken us and they are pulling ahead at a much faster pace. Their puppet, Pakistan, if you see, he is closing on to us slowly. So the moral of the story is we need to step up on the gas to maintain the balance. That is the perspective. Now coming to the PLAF aspect, I will answer your question in 3 points. One is the origin of PLAF is basically on Russian basis. The Russian model, the equipment, the philosophy, even the structure. And it was a tactical sort of a PLAF. And their orientation was not war fighting. The orientation was commercial issues and all that. So now, as the country started improving, the China, the economic conditions and all, the aspirations also increased.
Also, right.
The middle kingdom syndrome and center of the, a lot of theories are floating around. I have a theory of cone theory. Right. They feel they're in the center and they're on the top.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's combined.
So their aspirations are, whatever, superpower and, one sun in the sky and whatever you say, not avoid the century of humiliation, right. Get the glory back, whatever you want to call it.
Yes.
So since the aspirations increased, they realized for that they have to have expeditionary capability and which can only be given by the Navy and the Air Force. Now you see this in this perspective, in this light. In 1990, when the Gulf War took place, they woke up. They did it a very scientific way, like the Marshal said, the bid time, they held on and now they started. They studied, they read everything. And what have they done? They have given more importance to the Navy and the Air Force. They got them out of the clutches of Army, clutches or whatever you want to say. Even now, if you see the important, in the restructuring, important positions are being given to the Army and the Navy and the Air Force. They gave new technology equipment to the forces to fight. They did what we are struggling, Atmanirbharta. They have got a very good defense industry. He's written a book on it, very high class, that is self-sufficiency. So they've gone in a very scientific way. Now the capability building, they're also going in a very scientific way. They're identifying the weaknesses and one by one they are improving upon that. That is work in progress.
Right.
Now coming to, that is the evolution process. Sure. The second part, you asked me about the strategy or where does it fit into it.
The doctrine maybe.
I have a theory. In China, they use the defense forces for ruling the country. Okay. The army is owned by the party.
Right.
They use it for, now, this theaterization aspect. I'll diverse a little bit with your permission.
Okay.
If you see the map of China, you talk about Western theater is so huge.
Correct.
And it is area-wise equivalent to all the other 4 theaters.
Yeah.
Now you superimpose this theater map with any of the map of the China of road, railway line, population, density, even night life, night lights.
Correct.
You will realize why. It's not because of India, it is because their population is very thin, it is hardly anything. Whereas those are,
correct.
So they use it for
population is concentrated on the eastern seaboard.
Why I brought out this is we are learning from China for theaterization, but we are doing the wrong thing maybe. Anyway, this was digression.
Yes.
Why I wanted to bring out this was, now you come to the Air Force PLAF, back to it, and the aspiration to go expeditionary. Right. Okay, so the grand strategy is they are using the defense forces also now for foreign policy, which is what you're seeing in South China Sea. Right. They're using the Air Force, they're using the Navy, they're using the Army, and Air Force, they're doing long distance sorties, they're doing H-5, H-6 bombers, they're intercepting this thing, they're declaring ADIZs. Right. What is all this? Yeah. This is all strategic posturing by the use of
air power or even hard power.
So the hard power, air power also they're using for their foreign policy as a tool. Now coming to the third part of it, in the military strategy, whether the Air Force fit in PLA. Right. As I said earlier, they are coming out of the clutches of Army and the Army dominance and they're giving more importance to it. Right. I will not go into, I'll just cover 2 points. Right. One is the PLAF. One is that in the military strategy, they have got a very important role in the, what they call it, coercive, strategic coercion. Strategic question has got two elements. One is posturing, and second is muscle flexing. So if you see in Doklam, I handled Doklam in Eastern Air Command. All these airfields like Lesser brought out in Hotan, you will find fighters lined up in one line.
It's
15 of
basically
them.
projecting the
Whenever
power.
there is a meeting going on, this thing, they'll bring in S6.
Right.
These are all posturing. They're not for fighting, they're for show.
Yeah.
They're muscles, showing muscles.
So they actually fight in 5 domains, like I keep saying, Army, Navy, Air Force, land, sea, air,
And,
space, and then information
psychology.
warfare and psychology.
Yeah.
So,
So just one more issue I wanted to
Sure.
bring out. So the Air Force has got a lot of, their Air Force has got a role in this strategic coercion. Secondly, now if you see the PLAF whole model, 3 or 4 things stand out. One is their strategy is to avoid contact warfare. Very straightforward. That's why they are developing more long-range vectors. Their industry and their reliance on unmanned platforms is tremendous. Thirdly, electronic warfare, technology intensive. Fourth, space. So they have amalgamated the space and the air warfare. So this is very, very peculiar, and this is the way they are going. So the strategy-wise, they are into no contact warfare as well as possible.
correct. No, I think that's a very big point that he has made. And I think this is where we now have to, at least people like me who are watching from outside, have to change even our outlook to say not air power but aerospace power, like you mentioned in your opening remarks. But where does then India, apart from, of course, increasing the number of squadrons, combat squadrons and all that, what does India need to do in the long-term strategy as far as Air Force is concerned? What would be your prognosis or prescription?
Yeah, let me first take off from where Marshal Khosla was at the end when he said that what does no contact warfare? I think that word, I need to expand that into physicals, what are physically there. You see this H6 bombers, 120 of them they have got. They are coming out with the neo versions. The K version is already here. There's an N version which is coming up. There is another H version. Oh, they're doing... that includes one electronic warfare version, etc. Now, 6 cruise missiles. Now, we do not have with the Air Force a bomber of that class with such large number of cruise missiles. That's one area. If you look at their fighters, our fighters, they're more or less, we are sort of quality-wise, we are equivalent now with Rafale coming. When we get the full numbers, we will be sort of one up, but we still 36 is a small number.
Yeah,
one day we should have more of these. So fighters, we are simple. Transport aircraft, they have numbers, but overall we are balanced with them. Helicopters, they have got these Z10, Z19. Z19 is a smaller, like a light combat helicopter. Z10 is closer to the Apache. So attack helicopters wise, we can say we are balanced. Again, they have got a little more numbers than us. Right. We have got only 2 squadrons. They have got about 60 attack helicopters. Right. But some other areas where they are better off. One is that in that no contact warfare, they're going to use surface-to-surface missiles, which they have got large number. The total number of cruise missiles are also significant right now. We are also catching up, but numbers are still, we are short. So surface, in that no contact warfare, they feel that missiles are so much more difficult to defend from. Yes. And therefore, they are going to use those missiles in that no contact warfare. So therefore, how do we neutralize them?
Air defense?
Air defense, surface to air missiles. Do we have adequate numbers? Are we inducting them fast enough? Question marks. Because these are areas, I'll give you an example. For the LCA, in 1985, Indian Air Force made the SQR to say we need a replacement for MiG-21. And we know we have got just 20 odd aircraft today. And in 2001, when you wanted 126 aircraft, you're having
not even 36.
5 Rafales. So as a nation, somewhere we are going wrong in terms of modernization. The backlog of modernization of Indian Air Force is significant. There was a talk recently in the Air Force Association, US Air Force Association last year, in which they have got 312 combat squadrons, US Air Force. They have recommended that if you have to take on China and Russia, you require 384 combat squadrons. Now, No, of course, we don't have to compare with the Americans. It's in public domain, these figures.
Yeah.
Now, my contention is that we are at this terrible figure of 29, and we don't do something immediately. Immediately means yesterday.
Immediately, yeah, exactly.
We are going to go down further.
Right.
And as Marshal Khosla said, Pakistan is also catching up.
I was just going
They
to come to that.
are at 22 squadrons.
Yes.
Combat squadrons. Their target is 28, but I don't think they have money to go to 28.
Unless somebody donates to them.
But their numbers are coming up. So, to summarize, for no contact warfare, we are short of, we don't have the bombers of the class that they have got. We do not have sufficient cruise and SSM missiles. So what is going to help us succeed in that? We have seen in Kargil. You know, as Air Marshal Nambiar said a few days back in an interview, though the glory went to the LGB strike on the Tiger Hill,
Right.
because that is what the video the whole country could see. But the actual impact was the interdiction at Mantu Dhalo, where the entire logistic camp
Base was
finished
destroyed. Yeah, exactly.
with using 250 kgs dumb iron bombs. So the point I'm making is, what Indian Air Force will have to do in Ladakh is to take on targets, especially interdiction targets.
Right.
You know, there'll be some critical bridges which will stop
The
lines of
movement,
communications over there. There could be a concentration of tanks. They'll not be, it's no point taking on individual bunkers there. There will be some battalion and brigade headquarters that we'll have to knock on, because they will have all the communication nodes over there.
Right.
One more area which I want to highlight,
Sure. Please.
if you permit, is electronic warfare. That's an area where Chinese have got significant number of aircraft. Electronic warfare, they've got 14 large dedicated electronic warfare standalone aircraft. We have got electronic warfare on other aircraft.
Yes.
Their FRAs, we have only 6-7 FRAs, not sufficient.
Right.
See the number of FRAs they have got. AWACS, AEWs. I mean, the case for additional AWACS has been going on for last 15, 18 years. To have 3 serviceable, 4 serviceable AWACS is no number for a country like India. Forget to fight China, to fight anybody. Right. And again, this case has been going on for such a long time. Years, even the indigenous DRDO Netra AWACS that we have, just to have 2 numbers. I mean, you should have 10 of these smaller ones, at least 5 to 8 bigger AWACS. If you really want to face either of these 2 countries, leave alone taking them on together. And if the issue about taking them on together, between them, commonality of equipment and regular training, they have already finished the 8th series of Shaheen exercises. They are training quite a bit. Chinese are getting an idea from Pakistanis. Pakistan also learning how to fight a Su-30 class of aeroplane, which is with the other side. So I think this close coordination is something
which we have to be
we cannot take it casually.
We cannot take it casually. But Marshal Khosla, I also wanted to bring out this aspect, which is more or less ignored in most of the cases, is the man behind the machine. The Indian Air Force is going to be 80 years old in 2022. 90 years old in 2022, and it's the training, the ethos, the kind of skills that our men and officers and now women and officers have. I think that is quite underestimated. What would you, because you've handled all assignments, you would know where we stand there.
Yeah. So Nitin, you're very right. When you compare, it's not only numerical comparison or the platform comparison and its capabilities. It is very important to see, like I keep giving these examples. When you see a boxer, when you physically assess him, you see what is his height, what is his weight, how much muscles he have and all. But what is going on in his mind, you don't know.
Exactly.
How agile is he, you don't know. What tactics, what strategy he is going to use and fight, you don't know.
Right.
That is where this human element comes in.
That's right.
Absolutely right. So in this department, I feel we are ahead of them not only ahead, I feel we are much ahead of them. Why I'm saying this now, I'll qualify it is, one is that their tactics, our tactics is well established. We have platforms and equipment from different countries.
Exactly.
When these platforms and equipment comes, their war fighting philosophy also to certain extent comes along with it.
Right.
So we have imbibed that. We do exercises with whole lot of countries.
Right.
Okay, whole lot of them. We can divide them into various categories and we gain, and best practices are picked up. Second advantage, we have our own tactics and combat development establishment.
That's right.
We develop our own tactics. We pick up good things from all over the world. We adapt to ourselves and we make our own tactics.
True.
Whereas their tactics is, I call it a khichdi tactics. Secondly, they have not even evolved in the sense they have not even picked up these things. They do exercises only with Pakistan. Earlier days, even these exercises, they have done Shaheen series. That is why the interoperability with them, 8 of them they have done. But earlier ones, even the language problems used to be there. What I'm told is that there's hardly any meaningful exercise. So what I'm bringing out is, now they're picking up these tactics from media or wherever this thing, plus whatever they're trying to reach out with other countries. Secondly, Pakistan is helping them with all these BVR and other tactics, but they're learning fast. I must say that. But in this department, we are way ahead. So if you have to summarize, I would say the LAF is still crossing the river feeling the stones.
Exactly.
Okay, that is one aspect. Right. Second is, there is another aspect, the freedom for the, like, we have a lot of freedom of action to our pilots and the crew and this thing. Whereas in their case, they have two masters.
Right.
This is also, they're rectifying it. But this is also, there's too much of control over actions, even on the tactical front, forget about anything else.
Right.
So I would say on the whole that this aspect is very important. At the moment, we are way ahead of it, but we should continue being ahead.
I think both of you have brought out and the stark realities of where we are. We lack equipment. We should have actually modernized our aircraft, strengthened it numerically as well as technologically. Unfortunately, that has not happened, but maybe this is a wake-up call, and I think going forward, we will see some quick action, maybe fast-track acquisitions. I do not know, but the fact is, I'm glad that both of you spoke so candidly and brought out the issues that the Air Force faces, and yet we have done well. The Indian Air Force has done very well in its glorious history. So on that note, I want to end this episode, but do keep watching us, keep liking us on our social media platforms, watch us on the YouTube channel and of course our website. And coming back to give us more comments is what we will welcome from all of you. Until the next time, it's goodbye. Hello and program in association with USI. I'm Nitin Gokhale. And in this episode, we are going to talk about the western sector on the India-China boundary, the Ladakh sector as it is more popularly known as. With me is somebody who is eminently qualified to speak about the military aspects of it, the strategic aspects of it, Lieutenant General P.J.S. Pannu, formerly a corps commander in 14 Corps in Ladakh, and a man who has commanded a division in Arunachal Pradesh against the Chinese, started his career, if I may say so, as a young lieutenant in Tawang in 1982, and somebody who's actually walked those difficult areas. Welcome, General Pannu. In fact, since you commanded 14 Corps, let me start with 14 Corps, but that's something that we will talk in detail. Tell us something more about your tenure in the early 80s in Tawang, because I'm told that what the Chinese are doing now in Ladakh is not something that you all have not faced earlier. Is that so?
Thank you, Nitin. You've taken my mind back. There's a lot of nostalgia. When you cross Sela and at a point you see Tawang Monastery for the first time and people tell you, oh, you know, this is an ancient monastery. And then you start heading in that direction, you find there are people of Tawang. You find it very strange that it is called hidden land or hidden paradise. But when you talk to people, they all speak Hindi.
Correct.
And the evening entertainment, of course, there's a dragon dance and other things, which look very traditional, not so very well known to people in the plains. But when you start talking to them, they are Bollywood. It's a very interesting
Mix of, yeah.
Yes. But coming to the subject proper of my younger days, of course, we used to patrol certain areas at that time. It was still NEFA. Arunachal Pradesh was, in the making as a state, name of the state. Right. And I remember, Khandu Dorji Saab used to be a MLC there, and we used to go for walks, and he used to tell us stories of Tibet, and he used to tell us stories of this entire area of Kameng district. So my relationship, with the civilian counterparts and also understanding of the military set in very early when I started patrolling these areas, and absolutely God's own territory, very nice, simple people. We never saw Chinese at that time. We only patrolled these areas, and we could never understand where the LAC actually lies, because on the watershed, of course, the marking was known, but when you actually go there, you realize that it is a very, very difficult terrain to discern which height to which height does this line go, because it is neither surveyed nor walked together by the two sides in a similar manner, as against the international border, where it is surveyed, the international boundary is marked. So this is ambiguous area. And whenever we went to an area, we always wondered whether it lied in India or it lied in China.
Gone into China.
Yeah, but we patrolled that area. We were given areas that we should dominate, so we dominated those areas very well. And of course, there are a lot of stories, my getting lost in certain areas, and maybe going little away from the area, and maybe inside.
Inside, yes.
From the in the Chinese so-called claimed areas. So it is very interesting.
No, I can imagine. I can imagine, because what you mentioned, I just want to, before we get into serious discussion on the boundary and all that, I also want to share an incident with you. I went to Dong, which is in the eastern Arunachal sector near Walong. It's a village of 18 households, and it is on the Tri-junction of India, China, Myanmar. It's supposed to be receiving the first millennium sunrise. That's the time we went there. And the Gaon Boda, the village chief, actually spoke Hindi so fluently that the photographer who went with me from Calcutta, he was astounded completely. He said, I thought, these are Chinese people. And, that's the surprise that you get when you go to Arunachal Pradesh.
Yes.
But I think even Ladakh, where you commanded in your apex of your career, as a corps commander, when you commanded there just a couple of years ago or 3 years ago, tell me, the 14 Corps was raised at the turn of the century after the Kargil conflict. The need was felt there. How far have we come in terms of defense of Ladakh and Eastern Ladakh particularly, now that the Chinese are on the LAC?
Nitin, when you talk about defense, obviously, you have to talk about infrastructure. Infrastructure is not only the need of the military, but also need of the civil population. The border area development programs are unfolded by the government, and the civil administration carries it. And a lot of contractors and a lot of labor is at work at various places. It is also known that the China Study Group also has been looking at it, because they understand how between two countries over a period of time, they have shaped up boundary negotiations and discussions, and how much area can be developed in terms of infrastructure. So it gets dictated by those guided groups like China Study Group. A lot of work has happened. When you don't have a road or you don't have a landing ground, then obviously you cannot dominate the area with vehicles. You have to either use the aerial survey, or you have to go for long-range patrols, spanning over a week, 10 days, 15 days, carrying huge amount of loads on yourself. But in this particular case of Eastern Ladakh, during Maritime, a very important highway, that is the DSDBO, that came up to link up the DBO area, which is south of Karakoram Pass, which lays on the international border. Obviously, from my perspective or anybody else's perspective, Karakoram Pass is not disputed. It is on the international border. It is the area when you start looking at the map in the southeasterly direction, you find that there are claims which are contested by both sides. They are dictated by various operational and strategic implications from both sides, as you say, and both sides dominate these areas. These areas, there are two places where we have fixed points.
Correct.
In the DBO, we have DBO, TWD. Similarly, when you come south of Pegongso, we have Chushul, Moldo.
Correct.
So these are the 2 points again, which are fixed, where both sides come and have meetings.
Right.
So in the manner of understanding, when you have these 2 points where you have made infrastructure to meet,
Right.
obviously there is some understanding that you could come from that side and we could come from this side and we meet at that point and talk on whatever issues are there on the border.
That's right.
The other areas obviously then become a point of concern.
Yeah, exactly.
The Indian side dominates these areas through patrolling points.
Right.
As very
It's been now,
recently,
everyone
patrolling
knows
points
patrolling
are
points.
understood better, like PP14. Now,
Yes.
PP14 is nothing but one of the patrolling points, which is on the line of Indian LAC. And then it carries on, all the patrol points as marked by the Indians are the patrolling points.
Correct.
Similarly, Chinese would also be having their own patrolling points, which the serials, of course, we are not very familiar with, but they dominate those areas.
Correct.
As a result, we know that these patrols crisscross each other depending on the perceptions that they've had.
Correct.
And we have had regular face-offs, not only here, but also on the McMahon line.
Yes.
We had
Of
face-offs. And there is a certain drill that
The flag
over a
drill
period of
that you
time,
do.
we've had the Border Peace and Tranquility Agreement in 1993, the confidence building measures of 1996, and then of course in 2005 and 2013 also, you know,
The
in
BDCA
confidence
of
build-
2013. Yeah.
So one is that I'm talking about the points on ground which are
Right.
fixed,
Correct.
and the protocols which the two sides have had
Right.
on how to deal with areas which are disputed.
Right.
The face-offs have a protocol and a drill in
Yes.
which we do not fire at each other.
Correct.
We do not use military means because in the confidence building measures, we are not supposed to use military means. So when you go to your own areas of domination and they come to own area of domination, the face-offs have always been dealt by very matured protocol understanding between, and if there is any dispute, it is referred back to respective headquarters. They have a flag meeting at the BPMs in these huts, and the issues get resolved over a period of time. However, of course, in the history, in the recent history, you know, many face-offs have happened which are abnormal in nature, where larger force levels have come, stayed over a longer period of time, such as in 2013. Then in 2017, you know that
In
what
Dokland
happened in the
yeah.
Chumbi
But before
Valley.
that, in Chumur also, I think
Yes.
2014 there was another standoff.
Yes, in 2014 again there was a standoff, and of course, you know, Pegongso also we've had
Has always had that
you know, the two troops resorting to some kind of a violence without using the military means.
Yes, right.
So these kind of things happened, but I would correlate these dates to some happening somewhere or the other. People may not catch these events, and they might look at these events as a standalone event, but I think there is some relation and correlation to something or the other.
So in this case, since May, that we know that these standoffs have happened at multiple, what they now call friction points. But before that, I want to ask you this. There is a report that, understanding that there are some 15 or 16 disputed areas in Eastern Ladakh, starting from Trig Heights near DBO, going down to Dumshele. Now, in those, they also categorize into different categories. One is agreed disputed areas, the others are differing perceptions, and the third are the new areas that have come. Is that something that you are already familiar with, our troops are familiar with?
Thank you very much for bringing this out. When you have an agreed disputed area, it means neither should you venture nor should we venture into that area because it is agreed disputed. Why go in there? So both countries, so to say, should have laid down a limit of patrolling in those areas that, you know, we respect mutual dispute. You believe and trust that, you know, at diplomatic and political levels, these disputes would get sorted out and troops would know then how much to dominate and how much not to dominate. So a moratorium is put on patrolling so that you don't go into mutually agreed disputed areas. But the problem is in the disputed areas where they are very clear that their line of perception is which we don't agree to, and our line of perception which they don't agree to. And we don't say it's a mutually disputed area because we are very certain that that area belongs to us. It is not mutually disputed.
That's right.
And from their perception, unfortunately, also, they have a similar standpoint that they claim an area which is beyond what
Our line of perception.
into our own, claimed area.
Right.
So therefore, such disputes do come up.
Occur. So in the current context, now you mentioned that some incident is correlated to many of these standoffs. What is your assessment in this?
Let me take you back to 2013, or we can even go as far back as 1950. 1950, when two countries were still, into very nice diplomatic relations, and Hindi Chini bhai bhai, and good Bonohomi was being built between two countries. India marked a map in 1954, but the CPC at that time was looking at the entire thing because the communist regime had set in by then, and they had moved into Tibet. And they were also settling into certain areas like Xinjiang. And when they were settling in that area, they very quickly built a road just at the time when the our map was marked by the Survey of India. And we only came to know about it much later, but actually this road has taken 6 to 7 years to come up. I'm talking about the Western Highway G219, which links Lhasa to Xinjiang. When it was discovered that they built a road, obviously the road has been, been under construction. Some say 1955, but I think it started much earlier because the Silk Route, as it is, was being used in those areas, but it kept improving, to a gravel track. And in 2013, they actually blacktopped it. And they increased the size and the capacity of this road. That is the time when India was also building its infrastructure. The DSDBO had already kicked off. We were also building a road towards Demchok. More and more road construction was happening as part of the border area development and as part of the China study group
Dictated
to
India,
certain
China
certain
roads.
areas that we claim, and those are very, very undisputable claims. While we claim the entire Exide chain, but since we've had a history here, so the infrastructure was being built up. That is the time also when the Communist China offered that they would build a CPEC corridor, which is a Silk Route corridor.
Correct.
Through Xinjiang.
Correct.
Xinjiang, and they would then go into the CAR.
Right.
And that is the time in 2013 when they're offering economic packages to the CAR countries. They want to get into Eurasia. They are looking at Kashgar and then, CPEC corridor. A lot of stuff was happening at that time. And to see India build roads in the same direction, I think irked them quite a bit. And now when you come to this year, 2020, which is very different, obviously, COVID happened. A lot of people started blaming China for reasons of a COVID response was not good enough. They did not handle it well. And second thing is that they started flexing the muscles all over. It's not here. They started flexing
Japan
the
to
muscles
Bhutan,
all over.
as I say, yeah.
All over. What they're doing in Nepal, 2017, they went into Bhutan.
Yes.
And of course, many other countries, which is beyond the purview of our discussion.
Right.
But per se, Eastern Ladakh only looks isolated happening. But if you really join all these dots together, they do not want any disturbance, any infrastructure to be built in this area. When you say Ladakh is the land of passes, they're very sensitive to India building any infrastructure towards any pass, which would make the Indian troops cross the terrain and look towards the 219.
That's right.
And they are so sensitive that per se when Galwan track was being built, that actually goes into an area where you have a direct access into certain
into
interiors.
219. Yeah, interior,
The Galwan Valley
Yes.
continues to move in the easterly and southeasterly direction, which would make the Indian forces should, according to them, Indian forces should want to make a projection in that area much more convenient. So I think there was a lot of interplay with what we were doing.
There's a lot of
and
correction.
2020 as a year, which is different from any other year. Right. And again, joining the dots of 2013, 2014, 2017, and 2020.
Correct. No, you're right, absolutely. I mean, you have to have that sweep of history really to look at, what's happening. It cannot happen in isolation like you have mentioned.
Yes.
Let's look ahead a little bit. I mean, this whether this standoff gets resolved to everybody's satisfaction or not, the jury is still out, the discussions are still on. But going forward, and now that Ladakh has now become the union territory, as a military man, as a strategic thinker, what should be India's stance? I mean, what should India do to not only secure Ladakh, but also make sure that, the Chinese don't try the misadventure again? What would be your prescription really?
Starting with Article 370, which is a political action on an article which was temporary in nature. Yes. I think when the article came into being, it was even before the Constitution of India, was formalized. It was, I think, opportunistic and a very, temporary clause which was inserted to assuage the feelings of the then political establishment in the Kashmir, which was then becoming part of India, but in a very special way, because certain agreements had already been hinted at that some autonomy would be given to them. So Article 370, as a temporary measure, was introduced. Now, between then and now, almost 70 years, a temporary article cannot be continued to remain a permanent fixture.
Sure.
So, a political decision has been taken.
Correct.
For a military person, really speaking, political decisions can actually turn into certain misadventures on certain claimed areas, because then you are extending the provisions of Article 370 to a line which is your claimed area.
Right.
And when you look at the international border, obviously it has a ramification of sentiments into Exaichen and also into POK.
Exactly.
Because people would ask a question that now the Article 370, is it applicable to Exaichen or it is to Gilgit-Baltistan?
Exactly.
Well, the answer is that if you are claiming those areas, so under the claimed areas, there would be an extension of the spirit of the new, understanding of the article or removal of the article. So, yes, there is a political connotation to it. As far as military is concerned, military is nothing but an arm of the government of India.
An extension, yes.
It is an extension. It would certainly look at maintaining a status quo on where we are currently. Neither on its own military can alter the status quo on the line of control, nor on the line of actual control. So, our job is to maintain the status quo, unless the adversary disturbs it. And that is how the military comes into play. As far as the status quo is concerned, our understanding of the LAC and the line of control is where the military continues to develop military infrastructure, and also a military officer, a general, is given a task. You have to defend this territory. That's right. And he defends this territory. Correct. While there is an international convention that all these borders will remain under the purview of Ministry of Interior, as the international understanding is, which translates into Ministry of Home Affairs. So if you want peace to prevail as a larger understanding, these borders should remain under the Ministry of Home Affairs, because the borders seem to be settled. And I think in one of the other episodes, we were talking about that India looks at these borders as peaceful borders, or
Exactly.
we desire to bring peace
That's
there.
right.
But if you're going to look at these borders as future borders to contest, I think we need to look at it whether they should remain with the Ministry of Home Affairs, or should they be given to Ministry of Defense to defend these borders and to make sure that you do a military management on these borders.
That's a new thought, actually, and
Yes.
you're right that that becomes a military secondary task in a way, because otherwise you train to fight, you train to be aggressive in while you're fighting. But this task is analogous to military's instincts, I would say. I mean, I don't know whether you agree to that. But the fact that you have to manage the borders and constantly adhere to the CBMs may at some point strain the military, in a way. So should we have some new protocols? Should we have some a new arrangement to manage that border is something that you're hinting at if it comes to the MOD?
I will again go back a little back into the history and come and answer this question. Whenever I look at the McMahon line and
In
the
Arunachal Pradesh, yeah.
watershed
Right.
principle behind it,
Correct.
political entity or diplomatic entity looks at these borders very differently as against what the military looks like.
True.
When you draw a line which goes from a trig height to trig height, how does a military general look at defending that line? He would obviously want to go and sit on top of that ridge line.
Correct.
If you leave that ridge line, obviously you've given it up. And if the adversary comes and occupies it, such as Thagla Ridge for
Yes.
that matter, then it goes into the hands of adversary.
Correct.
So if you've drawn a line which is on the watershed, which military should occupy the watershed? And any military which leaves the watershed has lost that ground.
Lost, exactly.
Because as the lay of the terrain is, the next nala or the next ridge line could be 25 to 30 to even 50 kilometers
Yeah,
away.
so
And you
in
cannot
between, yeah.
go and occupy the next height.
Right.
So on a map, it would appear that you have given 50 to 60 kilometers of line. So as a result, the military would want to go and sit on the watershed.
Right.
And similarly, the adversary's military would also want to come and sit on the watershed.
So peaks are the high grounds that you
Yes.
always need to occupy.
Absolutely. So that is one aspect where a diplomat drawing a boundary and for a military officer to defend the boundary, there is a little perceptual difference of understanding.
True.
Similarly, when you are to defend the territory, not only that you want to occupy these heights, but you also need to defend the passes. As I was saying that it is a land of passes called Ladakh. Anybody who defends these passes or dominates these passes are the ones who would be able to manage these heights well, because these are the places from where you will get access to the land on the opposite side. In this particular case, most of the passes, unfortunately, have been held by China. And whichever passes are not held or lie on the disputed area, there is a constant race for the passes. And if the decision is to be taken on claims, a military officer would always draw a line of claims which include certain passes towards their own side. And obviously, militaries would think alike, and the disputes arise. If the military has to defend the territory, obviously you would want those passes to be with your own military to occupy, dominate, and consolidate those positions and build defenses there. But since under protocols that the LAC is not settled and there are 22 boundary negotiations which are happening, which are not yet seen to be agreeing on a particular line. If the line had been agreed to, yes, there was no requirement of military to be sitting there. The military goes and sits there because there's a dispute.
Because there's a dispute, yeah, exactly. You're
Because
guarding.
there's a dispute, both militaries are active there.
Right.
If both militaries are active, there are face-offs there.
And, it's
if
bound
there are
to
both
happen.
face-offs there,
Yeah.
if the moment you build infrastructure, even before you are competent enough and you empower your military to go through the infrastructure development and occupy those areas, these kind of activities such as Galwan incident and other incidents do unfold.
Sure.
So as a result, we have to choose to defend a line.
Right.
Which, according to how anybody would think, is not disputed.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that where you defend your line only becomes
Is
your
claim
front
line.
line.
Or a front line.
So it doesn't become your front line.
Right.
The front lines don't have to be given up just because there's a defensive line.
Correct.
So the military would obviously look at consolidating in certain areas.
True.
But the two countries, or in fact, if you talk about Pakistan also, the three countries now in this particular case are nuclear powers.
Right.
Why would you have such strong military to be deployed? Because is that how you're going to fight a conventional battle and decide how you would settle a boundary dispute? Because it can very quickly escalate into something totally different.
Correct.
Because all-out war is not
in
fighting,
anybody's interest.
Fighting, or also not fighting just ridge lines. No. All-out war can take you to shooting missiles and even going nuclear.
Modern, exactly. Modern wars can get into different domains.
So best situation, even now militarily, is that what is being decided between the two corps commanders are to amicably separate the two forces.
Right.
Till the time the boundary gets settled. By the political and the diplomatic community who have been at work for very long, and give them an opportunity to settle the boundary dispute.
Correct.
But to say that, look, our interests are our interests and we don't care about your interests and vice versa, I think this will then continue to keep the situation the way it is, which would mean that you will continue to build military forces in those areas. And both sides will continue to bring more infrastructure, which is military in nature.
Belligerence from
more
both
belligerence
sides.
will happen. The chances of accidents go up, which I think mature nations should make an endeavor to prevent.
I think you are absolutely right, and I think I'm going to end on that note, because this is something that one has been talking about for a decade or so, that ultimately when the boundary is settled, there has to be some give and take which is mutually agreeable to both sides. And for that, the country needs to be prepared. The public opinion needs to be prepared for that kind of a give and take, not surrender as anybody would think, but a kind of respectable give and take will have to happen. I'm sure that's something that you are hinting at. But I think you have given a great insight into what Ladakh means, a land of passes, and also how passes are important. I think on that note, I'm going to end this episode of Strategic Insight. We'll come back with more on maybe the maritime issue and how India and China face off in the maritime domain in the next few episodes, and also look at the air power comparison, or how the two air forces face off. But for the moment, let me thank General Pannu for his insights and his thoughts, and of course request you to keep watching us on StratNews Global and keep liking us on our social media platforms. We welcome any feedback that you have, and we will take up suggestions if you make them, which are practical, and of course come back with more in the next episode of Strategic Insight. Until the next time, it's goodbye. You're StratNews Global, and I'm Nitin Gokhale. In the second episode of Strategic Insight, in association with United Service Institution, located in New Delhi, India's oldest think tank, we are bringing to you this program looking at the China challenge from various angles. Last time you saw the importance of Arunachal Pradesh and what India has done over the years to secure that place and also meet the China challenge in Arunachal Pradesh. In this episode, we are going to look at Sikkim, the tiny Himalayan state which was integrated into India in 1975 and has strategic significance when it comes to relations with China, and of course the boundary dispute or boundary standoff that happens with China. So to look at the strategic significance of Sikkim in the context of India and China, we have with us a very distinguished panel. To my left, Major General B.K. Sharma, the Director of USI, and of course somebody who has great experience in dealing with the Chinese, especially in Sikkim and elsewhere, of course, through his career. He is somebody who started off as a young officer getting deployed on the Siachen Glacier way back in 1982-83, and of course then went on to become a Major General in the Army. And to my right, a familiar face for you, Lieutenant General Devraj Anbu, a former Vice Chief of the Army Staff, and again somebody who has dealt with the Chinese both in Sikkim, Arunachal Pradesh, and as Northern Army Commander in Ladakh. Welcome both of you. And General Sharma, if I can start with you. Sikkim is of course a very small tiny state, but was in focus in 2017 when the Dolam or the Doklam crisis, the standoff happened with China. Tell us a bit about that sector of the India-China boundary and what significance does it hold for India?
Thank you very much for getting me to your show. Sikkim is strategically very, very important state for India. While its borders are very short, about 220 kilometers, but it is a strategic wedge between Nepal on one side and Bhutan on other side. And with both neighboring countries, it has open borders. If you look at towards Johnson Peak and you go further south, there's about 50 kilometers open border it has with eastern Nepal, and then you get into Siliguri corridor. Likewise, you go to the further east and you look at the Tri-junction area. Well, we call Tri-junction Batangla Pass, but Chinese say it's the Gyamuchin Peak. Again, you have an open border. There's no deployment down to Siliguri corridor, which is just about this thing. And then the whole state of Sikkim, the watershed, has an overwhelming domination over strategically vital Chumbi Valley. That's extremely important.
Which is in Tibet or
Which
China.
is in Tibet in China.
Right.
So both from defensive point of view and from our options point of view, it is extremely important. I would also like to mention here that Gangtok is the only state capital which is closest to China border in entire. There is only, you know, you have the Canggu Heights, and then suppose Canggu Heights are there, and then, you know, he is actually looking at the state capital. Now, this entire area lends itself to some kind of a asymmetric and collusive warfare. I'll tell you, if you look at the Nepalese border, Chinese have already made a road from Shigatse to Tiptila Pass, and from Tiptila Pass to the area of Ilam, Thaplijang, Jaffa, which was the heartland of Maoist movement, you know, you have Thimbuwan and all. All these places, Chinese have great influence. They have made roads, panchayat roads are being funded by them. They have created Maoist cultural centers. They're even modernizing their police stations. So it can become absolutely an asymmetric frontier for them to do some trouble and actually interdict a single axis which is leading to the rest of state of things. Same is the state or towards, suppose they come to Jampheri ridgeline and Gyamuchin.
Right.
Then as the crow flies, you know, the Siliguri corridor is just about 40 kilometers, which gives them tremendous strategic domination as far as this corridor is concerned. Right. Now, the corridor per se, the Siliguri corridor, is a lifeline to state of Sikkim. But on the other hand, state of Sikkim gives certain depth to corridor, that if this state, you know, if it is not secured, then the corridor also gets affected. So this in nutshell is the strategic significance of state of Sikkim. Now, there are also number of flashpoints here, which could become a trigger for some kind of a conflict. And we know 2017 we had the Doklam or the Dolam crisis,
Yes.
and they have a sizable presence today along Mirugla Sinchela ridge line. You know, they
On their side of the
their side of this thing.
IB, yeah.
So they have sizable, but earlier they had nothing south of Yatung except some platoons deployed here and there facing the ridge line. So now they have a sizable presence there. Similarly, they have activated Nakula. You know, we had a standoff.
Right.
And I have been privy to number of standoffs in the area of Finger and Plateau for 2 years.
And finger in Sikkim, I must emphasize,
Yes.
because you know, people will mistake it for finger because which is now very
No.
common, not in Ladakh but in Sikkim.
Finger in Sikkim, the rim area where they wanted to construct road, they wanted to come forward to Finger 5 as we call it, but sort of we deterred them and ultimately we've been able to prevail. But at any point in time, they can throw up these areas again. Like in 2007, well before Doklam crisis had happened, they had destroyed 3 of the bunkers which were on the forward slopes of Dokla,
Yes.
Doklam there. So these kind of potentials are there for them to do anything. But more importantly, in any future conflict, I think they would like to secure Chumbi Valley in a very big way because this is their critical vulnerability. So the whole calculus of our military equation should be, how do we ensure that we keep our Chumbi Valley options open?
That how we dominate, continue to
How we
dominate.
continue dominate, and it is a very good option for us to do some quid pro quo. Should we get under pressure in some other sectors and all, then I think we can really pay them up. And for that, Bhutan has also a tremendous significance. So this in nutshell, I would say there are, if you want me to elaborate, what are our options, how we can
No,
do,
we will talk
we
about
could
that.
do it
We'll
subsequently.
talk it. Yes, we will.
But
we will.
this in nutshell is the strategic significance
That's
of
true.
Sikkim.
So, General Anbu, you had commanded 17 Div in Gangtok before you went to 4 Corps in Tejpur. Now, Sikkim, as General Sharma has rightly mentioned, has been generally the quiet area, but also has a lot of flashpoints, potential flashpoints. It's also abetting Bhutan in a way, and last time we spoke about Bhutan's importance to the coming sector. So here, what is the importance of Bhutan when it comes to the Tri-junction and the Chumbi Valley and Sikkim as far as Indian deployments are concerned?
Just like General Sharma mentioned, that Chumbi Valley is a very narrow valley. As you come to the south of the Chumbi Valley, it gets so narrower that the width is just about 4 kilometers. And the entire Donkyala Chola ridge is dominated by us. Except one pass, Jalapla Pass, rest of the pass is held by India. And it's very, the terrain is very typical here. Like you see the fingers in Pegongso North Bank, here you have Amacho River coming down from Yatung down to the Chumbi, and you have the fingers going from the Chola Ridge into the Yatung, converging somewhere north and south of Yatung.
Right.
So he is segmented in those fingers and he has to come up. Okay, it's a very narrow. Now coming to the importance of Bhutan, there is a similar ridge on the Bhutan opposite Yatung. That's called the MK Ridge, which goes down right up to the tip of the Chumbi Valley. And because he doesn't have the depth, strategic depth, if he has any offensive capability, then perforce he has to have some elbow room, for which he can only look to the east and not to the west, because west the ridges are very high and very well dominated and very intricate defenses are there. But whereas on the Bhutan side, it's not so. So if he does try to expand to the west to get some elbow room, is where the Bhutan comes into play. And that's where the Mirgula Sinchula Ridge and the Dokala Plateau, where he is coming and sitting now, and then the Gamachun Ridge, all this comes into play.
But tell me, I mean, and I'll ask both of you first to General Sharma. The 2017 Doklam crisis, we said, and people have commented on this, that we deterred the Chinese from building that track that they were trying to build. They had to withdraw and go back. Subsequently, the Chinese have come in strength and force. But does that change any of our dominance in terms of deployment or the heights that we are dominating against them in Chumbi Valley? Or does it give him any additional advantage that he is now built on their side of the border?
See, the place where he is sitting presently, it doesn't give him any tactical advantage. It is a mere presence there that earlier this area was totally denuded of any troops.
Right.
So it's a non-tactical deployment. But some troops are available to meet any contingencies. But no military logic will tell you that he would try and come down into Dokala Plateau, which is about 89 square kilometers, and then start, doing something towards Jampheri ridgeline and come towards Gyamachin, because that is not militarily, tactically feasible. The very strategic configuration of the ground is such that we are dominating from three sides, overwhelming heights, and the kind of firepower that we can bring to bear into that area, that operation will get aborted right at the very outset. So it's just a physical, non-tactical presence which is there, which will enhance its capacity to probably do patrolling and probably reinforce some of the areas where he is on the lower slopes.
So basically, it's a battle of perception, it's a psychological kind of messaging.
Absolutely.
That we have come there. Although you forced us to go back, we are there.
Yes.
That's, I think, what has happened. So that's reassuring to know.
Yeah, and one more thing which General Ambu has alluded. You see, there are two lifelines that he has into Chumbi Valley. One is the eastern feeder, which comes from an area called Shigatse, then you have Khambazong, Traxing Gompa, Chogala, and then it comes to Yatung, which is about class 18. The bigger road, which is coming through Farizong axis into Yatung, is about class 40. Now, south of Yatung, into this area of Doklam where his deployment is, it's a single axis. Because that single axis has overwhelming domination from the watershed that we are holding.
On the west.
On the west. So any build-up of troops south of Yatung is going to be suicidal actually, should he actually get into some kind of a military conflict with this.
Yeah. So that's good to know, because 3 years after the Doklam crisis, there is a huge kind of spate of articles which have come that, what have you achieved? You may have achieved a tactical victory in Doklam, but strategically is outmaneuvered you. Would you agree to that formulation?
I totally agree with what General Sharma said. It is a non-tactical advantage that he has got. If I was in his place and if I intend to do an offensive, first thing is I will vacate from there. Or I will go down as deep as possible so that nothing comes on me.
Right.
So militarily it doesn't really augur well for him.
Right.
So yes, in the normal situation, it's okay to prove a point. But come conflict, I think as I would be more happy that he has come there.
If he sits there.
Yes, I would be able to take a sitting duck.
Right.
And I would cause so much casualty on him, they will be so demoralized.
Right.
And they will never be able to step further from that.
So that's something that is again, that's a good clarification coming from military professionals like you, because that has dominated the discourse actually, that he is built there, he is put in forces. But let me move away from that and look at the present context. After what he has done in Ladakh, what the Chinese have done in Ladakh, and then of course Nakula, and now in the future we don't know, because one assessment is that he is testing India's resolve and reserves and tactics and strategy, and how do we deal with it. Like he's making Indian army run from one end to the other, this kind of thought process that has been articulated. So in that sense, I wanted to ask you, as somebody who's dealt with all these issues at the highest level, what should India's strategy be in east of the chicken's neck, apart from what you do in Arunachal Pradesh? Sikkim is somewhere, if we are dominating, is that one place where we can actually do quid pro quo against the Chinese if something happens in other places?
No, we have very many places. As I mentioned in your previous episode, Tawang is a very good place where we are very well poised, sitting on the ridge line. Similarly, we have large number of areas where there are options for us to...
in Sikkim?
In Sikkim, yes. Complete East Sikkim and Southeast Sikkim, we are more dominating. It is not that General Sharma very clearly mentioned, Chumbi Valley is a vulnerability for China. I want to reinforce it's a vulnerability for him. If he is doing anything, whether he is trying to bring a railway line to Yatung, or he is trying to bring so much of deployment onto Doklam in the Sinchula Mirugula Ridge, it is his vulnerability that is forcing him to take all this. He knows that we are very strong. That there's no doubt about it. We can always take him on any stage. There's just no...
That's good to know. General Sharma, also apart from Sikkim, just abutting Sikkim is the chicken's neck, which has been spoken about in various ways as India's vulnerability, that if you cut off chicken's neck, then the northeast gets cut off or comes under pressure. And there is also Bangladesh in that area. In that context, what should India's policy be while dealing with both Bhutan and Bangladesh? Bhutan, of course, you have mentioned, but Bangladesh is also a kind of something that we intangible kind of mix in the element.
Yeah, so I would like to first highlight the strategic importance of Siliguri corridor,
Right.
which is very well known otherwise, you know,
Correct.
how it connects different countries and our states.
Yes.
But more importantly, you know, there are a number of vulnerable, what we call this VAs and VPs in the military parlance.
Yes.
They are there.
Valuable assets.
Valuable assets and
targets.
points. For example, you have two air bases there, Hashimara and you have Bagdogra.
Yes.
You have an aviation base in a place called Shaugon.
Right.
You have multimodal connectivity. You have the fiber optics link.
Right.
Then you have your the oil pipeline which is coming.
To Barauni from there, yeah.
Oil pipeline. Yes. And then you have number of military installations, key military installations, logistic installations located there. I do not visualize any classic military threat to Siliguri corridor per se. Many people talk about airborne operations and heliborne operations and blah, blah, blah. That's not feasible. The kind of, you know, air defense and other things that we have there, he will get totally mauled. But the threat is more asymmetric in nature. You know, the non-state actors. You have this KLO organization there, which is that
Kamrapur Liberation Organization.
You have Rajbongshi
Yes.
insurgent groups. You have the GGMM, the Gurkha Jan Mukti Morcha movement, you know, which has been simmering there from time to time. And you have Huji and such like other organizations which can come. Then Malda has become very unstable because of the demographic inversions and all kind of illegal activities are taking place there. So some of these non-state actors can be leveraged by our adversaries either through porous border of Bangladesh or Nepal to create a little bit of a turmoil
And instability.
which will affect our mobilization and our access to some of these states, and it has its own economic losses. Unfortunately, we do not have a very cogent and coherent system of maintaining security in Siliguri corridor. On one side, you have the BSF. On the other side, you have the SSB looking after Bhutan and Nepal border. Then ITB somewhere in the areas that looking China. Even intelligence organizations are not very well, you know, networked there. So as a result, there is nobody who is actually in charge of Siliguri corridor.
Yeah, that's the vulnerability.
That is the vulnerability, that if tomorrow this corridor is exploited and activated through asymmetric means, then to begin with, we'll have that kind of a chaotic condition there. And I think it is right time for us to set some of these issues in order so that we are able to have sustainable security of Siliguri.
I get your point, but having lived in the Northeast for a long time, I have one more element which I always worried about is the monsoon and the weather and the flooding of the plains of North Bengal and adjoining areas of Assam, because the railway line gets cut off for a number of days, maybe at months together. And of course, then there are these smaller organizations that you mentioned, KLO. There are Bodos who launch
Ulfas on the other side.
All of those. You've commanded in Tejpur, in 4 Corps. How are those elements looked at? I mean, there has to be some kind of a backup plan for these intangibles or threats, if not threats, at least the disruptions that are there.
Basically, beyond Siliguri corridor, it is mainly the Assam.
Right.
So, having dealt with Assam government, I can tell you that they are much well prepared. They have a system in place. They have a war book where all agency gets coordinated, and there is a number of rehearsal takes place, and they are quite well prepared to take care of any interruption to the lines of communication. Coming to the Siliguri corridor, like General Sharma mentioned, you have West Bengal, you have the Assam and Sikkim all mixed up. So therefore, there's someone who has to take stock of the situation and bring about some order here, like it's being done elsewhere. I think a little bit of a coordination and an effort from the Ministry of Home Affairs, I think getting all of them together with the states, I think we'll be able to solve it. It's not a very big thing, but it needs little bit of an time and effort to do that.
Because it also connects, Siliguri also connects Sikkim, Bhutan, Darjeeling and the rest of the northeast.
Yes.
So actually, in a way, strategically, it is a very, very important kind of an area. And if we have to keep the Bhutan on our side, in the sense that they don't get upset with it, I think that's one of the areas which is used by the Bhutanese more frequently than anywhere else, I think.
From Phuntsling
From
to this
Phuntsling
place.
to this
Yes.
place. So in that sense, you would have dealt with the Bhutanese, both of you. A bit of thing about the people-to-people contact, or what is changed in Bhutan because it's become a democracy. Do you foresee some kind of differences of opinion between the democratic political leaders of Bhutan and the royalty? To you, General Sharma first, and then to General Anbu.
See, I have been twice to Bhutan and have had discussions with the King 4, King 5, their PM, their Chief of Army Staff and all. I don't think this is a major factor in Bhutan as yet.
Okay.
There are people in the northern areas who are doing illegal trade with the Tibetans and this and that. That's a very minority sentiment that we should have better connectivity. Those are purely individual commercial interests. But the people of Bhutan per se have seen which way the Tibetans have gone. And they are very enamored with Bhutanese way of life. And I mean, no allurement and no kind of enticement will actually deviate them from that Bhutanese way of life, and that is very much secured by being aligned with India. But the larger issue is we can't take them for granted.
Right.
You know,
Exactly.
they have those aspirations. The democracy will bring new aspirations, new hopes, and new conditions.
Correct.
And therefore, we have to be alive to those sentiments and realign our policies and don't take them for granted what we did to people of Nepal.
Right.
I leave it at that.
Okay. General Anbu, your thoughts? Bhutan, I hear some discordant voices sometimes from Bhutan, but generally I know that the Bhutanese say that we are south looking, not north looking. What is your thought also?
In Bhutan, I think we have a fantastic relationship at all levels. And 2-3 things which is very positive is the alignment of the royalty there with the government in power. Second, the democracy, as I said, is a fledgling democracy. They have their own challenges. It was brought in by the 4th king. He himself voluntarily abdicated his throne and wanted democracy to come up. So naturally, he wants democracy to thrive in Bhutan. So the fledgling democracy will have its own challenges of meeting the aspirations of the people. And in the people is basically the young people who have suddenly got exposed to the outside world through the social media, and their expectations are also like anybody else, any other young population. They want so much, all those things to be met. So there are some conflicts at this level in the social media generated, but otherwise the people are, they understand very well as to where they need to really align, because geographically if you look at, they are all huge high mountains with
That's
no
what they keep saying,
connectivity
that
to,
we are always looking
they
south.
always have to look at, south.
India and south.
And the elder people in Bhutan, they have, and it's a very close society, I must tell you, less than 1 million population.
Right.
Each one knows if he's living in Western Bhutan, he definitely knows even people in the Eastern Bhutan. It's a very close-knit society.
Right.
Therefore, nothing can really shake if the foundation is very good. It's a transition.
Yes.
Probably yes, the social media, if it is manipulated by the adversary, can make a dent temporarily,
Yes.
but it is only temporary. The other point, sorry, before
Yes,
you close,
yes,
the other
please.
point I want, the relationship between the Royal Bhutan Army and the Indian
was just
Army
going to say
is
that, yeah.
phenomenal.
Correct.
I think one of the pillars on which the Indo-Bhutan relationship is existing is on this.
Right.
So therefore, nothing really can shake.
Yeah, no, that's very assuring and reassuring to know, because that area is strategically extremely important. but not as vulnerable as, say, extreme heights of Arunachal Pradesh or some parts of Ladakh where there is no population. I mean, we suddenly won't know what's happening. But here, that problem does not exist. And both of you have served in that area. It's good to know what's happening on that front. And that's all I have to discuss in this episode. We will come back again with more details on maybe next time on Ladakh and India's challenges in Ladakh. But that is something that is an ongoing crisis right now. Hopefully, by the time we come and discuss Ladakh, that crisis would be over. But till the next discussion, please do keep liking us on our social media platforms, keep sending us comments and feedback, and keep watching StratNews Global. I am Nitin Gokhale. Hello and welcome. You're on StratNews Global and I'm Nitin Gokhale. Today we launch a new series, Strategic Insight, in association with the United Service Institution, India's oldest think tank located in New Delhi. And in this series, we are going to discuss the China challenge that India is faced with in the context of what happened at the line of actual control in Ladakh and elsewhere along the Himalayan frontier. So, Strategic Insights first episode, I am delighted to join Lieutenant General Devraj Ambu to my left, former Vice Chief of the Army Staff, also former Co-Commander at Tejpur, the 4 Corps that is located there. And to my right, Major General Rajiv Narayanan, who is the Head of Strategic Studies and Simulation at the USI. Both are China specialists, have dealt with China at various levels and have actually a ground experience of what happens on the land boundary with China and how to deal with the PLA. So let me first turn to General Anbu, who retired as Vice Chief of the Army in 2019 and as I said has had experience both in Sikkim and Arunachal Pradesh besides being the Northern Army Commander. General Anbu, in the context of what we are seeing or have seen at the LAC in Ladakh, there is a view that Ladakh was just a diversion and the main challenge may come in Arunachal Pradesh where in 1962 the main battle took place in the Kameng sector. How do you see that kind of thought that is there in some people's mind that Arunachal may be a bigger challenge?
Nitin, if you look at the entire northern front, apart from the interest of Aksai Chin for China in Eastern Ladakh, I feel one of the very, very important objective that he's looking at is Tawang. It's very politically sensitive and very important. If at all anything happens and he's looking at any one objective that he needs to take, then it's going to be Tawang. So therefore, we need to be prepared all across. If you ask anyone about Tawang or Arunachal, straight away in Arunachal, they home on to Tawang. And it's because of two things. One is the monastery that's there, which is the oldest monastery, and it has got one of the links to the Tibetan form of Buddhism. And it's the largest one, Gelugpa sect, which is practiced there in Tawang Monastery. The other is, of course, the 1962 war. See, one of the major offensives out of the 3 came in Tawang sector and it came from 3 directions.
Correct.
So it's very important, the other being in Lohit Valley and in Trishul sector.
Sure. In fact, since you commanded 4 Corps, which is based in Tejpur, which also took part or sort of was hastily raised pre-1962 in October when the conflict began. For the Chinese, they also called entire Arunachal as South Tibet, for instance. And I think that is their more kind of political aim, as you mentioned rightly, that Tawang is a prized catch for them if they want to do it. So in that sense, what is our strategic challenge there? Because in 62, I can understand our forces, while they were gallant and brave, they were not equipped or even acclimatized. How things have changed there, if you can give us some idea as far as Indian Army is concerned?
Yeah, Nitin, before I go to that, a little bit on the history. I know everybody knows about it. Till about mid 80s, Tawang was, entire Arunachal was not on the cards of the China. They were only looking at Ladakh and Akshay Chin. And McMahon line, they were quite comfortable to bargain with the status quo in Akshay Chin. It's only post that the interest in Tawang started. And very distinctly in 2006, when the president came and the 4-5 days before the visit, the ambassador from China to India made a very clear statement claiming the entire Arunachal, not only Tawang. So they made it very clear that they have an interest in Tawang and entire Arunachal. They claim about 90,000 square kilometers, but otherwise it's about 84,000 square kilometers, of which they have a claim of about 65,000. How it has changed from then to now, the question that you asked me. Beyond Bomdila, there was no track. You really had to walk up in mules and things like that to Jhang, and then foot it all across to whether opposite in Namkachu or in Bumla or anywhere in the same.
Right.
The communication now has tremendously improved. As you know, Nitin, a couple of days back, you covered the infrastructure in Tawang sector. Right. You covered the backbone infrastructure. Is absolutely, I totally take it, whatever you mentioned. I think we just need to wait for end of this year or probably next year end. The Sailor tunnel would be in place, and the double laning of the BCT, Balipara, Chardwar, Tawang. So that will also be in place. Once these backbone infrastructure is in place, and within the Tawang Ball, quite a bit of work has gone in, both in the internal communication and also defense-related structures. The biggest problem in Tawang is, if you look at the map of Arunachal Pradesh, it's from north to southwest. And this is at one corner, southwestern corner. And since the time the Tawang became a district in 84, carved out from the West Coming, you see it's a very small area, just anything ahead of the Sela Massif comes under Tawang district. The southern and the western part of the Tawang district rest on the eastern boundary of the Bhutan.
Correct.
It's a north where it's open, and east is beyond the Sela is with the west coming. So it's a very important thing. And to reach this, you have to cross series of ridges, before you reach. If I have to say, there are three distinct ones. The Nechifu Ridge, which is almost about 10,000. Then you go down to about Tenga River, it's about 3,000 feet. Then again you climb up to Bomdila, which is again about 8,500 odd feet. Then again you go down to Dirang,
yes,
which is again about 5,000 feet.
Correct.
Then you climb to the Sela Massif, which is about 13,700 feet.
Yes.
Then you go down to the Jang and the Jang Falls, famous Jang Falls. It is again 5,000. Then you get to Tawang, it's about 9,000 feet. Then from there you lug all the way to Bumla, which is about 15,300 feet,
Sure.
You see the treacherous thing. But in all this, it also has a positive. If you look at the height of Tawang, Bumla, which is 15,300 as I mentioned, and Sela Massif, it's about 13,700. Though if this distance, he cannot see anything beyond Sela, what's happening.
So it's a good defensive position.
Yes,
if
absolutely.
required.
For you to build up and things like that, it's good.
Yes.
Yes, now that the backbone communication is in place and the tunnel would come in Sela, I think we are in a very good situation as far as the mobilization and the mobility is concerned.
That's good to know. I will come back to you on the importance of Bhutan or significance of Bhutan to west of the Sela Massif. But let me turn to General Narayanan. You've commanded the, I think at that point in time, it used to be the biggest division, 2-div based in Dinjan, which looks after what is called the rest of Arunachal Pradesh. And of course, the kind of focus that is there on Tawang or Kameng may not be there in the popular perception on that rest of Arunachal Pradesh or 2-div area. But tell us, what is the significance of that area? And what are the strengths or weaknesses that we have in that area while facing the Chinese?
As far as the significance is concerned, first thing that when we say that he claims the whole of Arunachal, it's whole of North Arunachal. The area south of Upper Assam, which is the Tirap, Changlang and the Longling, he doesn't want that. He's not interested in that. Maybe because he feels that he can reach it through North Myanmar. I'll touch upon it later.
Sure.
So, these areas are more for the resources. It's if you look at his map, which he has mapped post 2006, as General Anbu had mentioned, where they show all this as part of China, he has planned hydropower projects all in these areas. So he is looking more through that, and my assessment is he is looking at it more for a bargaining chip. Otherwise, Tawang is his main key area where he wants. Initially, yes, he was, because the terrain here is exactly similar to what General Anbu had mentioned in Tawang. Correct. You have four heights. Means you start from Brahmaputra, you climb up steeply. Right. Then there is a steady climb, you go down, then again there is a climb. So till you reach the LAC is the fourth ridge that you have to climb up. So construction of infrastructure on our side is that much difficult. On the other side is a plateau.
Correct.
So though he had made it earlier, today we are quite better off in these areas. Like if we take it to 62, Lohit, today we dominate Lohit. If you want to, you can walk into that area anytime you want to. There is hardly any deployment presence that he has. His regulars are all in Sichuan and beyond. There is nothing this side in Tar area. The bridges have come up for crossing of Brahmaputra, which used to be a major issue. You had only one, the Brahmkund bridge. So now you have two more which has come up, the Dhola Sadia and the railroad bridge next to Dibrugarh, Bogibeel, which has come up. Now the tunneling projects are also coming up, which improves the infrastructure. The broad gauging of the railway line, both north and south of Brahmaputra, has been completed. So movement of your troops and resources have started off. The railway link is making a loop through the Bogibeel. So your movement of resources now has become much faster.
Right.
You have physical presence here which he doesn't have. He has only the border guards. He has 3 independent brigades which are there, the combined arms brigades, but they are all echeloned towards Western Ralph / Tawang.
Not the eastern part.
Not towards the central and eastern part.
So, I just for our viewers' sake, the eastern part includes Walong, Kibitu, that area, and then
the Dibang.
The Dibang Valley, which is there.
See, when you look at study the map,
right,
there is a very neat ridge which runs north to south, the Abrokala ridge.
Right.
We also in 2Div, we also call it the terrain warp. That is the great bend of the
Brahmaputra.
The
Lohit.
Sangpo,
yeah.
The Sangpo. There is a huge Himalayan massif, which is the eastern end of the Himalayas, which is called the Namcha Barua.
Yeah.
And then when you look at the map, west of it, the rivers flow northwest to southeast. East of Abrokala Ridge, which continues from there straight down, it's all north-south. So Abrokala eastwards is the eastern Ralph, and Abrokala westwards is the
western rest of Arunachal Pradesh. That's good to know. In fact, this is what brings me to what General Anbu was saying about infrastructure. I mean, even me as a civilian remember getting to Walong or Kibitu used to be such a pain. We had to cross the rivers and streams on elephant back, on boats, and then sort of get across going through Haileong, going to Kibitu or Walong. But today all that has been eliminated because you have the Dibru Sadia, the
Brahmkund bridge,
the Brahmkund bridge.
The Dhola Sadia
bridge, which is the longest bridge in India at 9.15 kilometers. So I think that has improved tremendously. In terms of deployment, General Anbu, there is also the roads, alternate roads that are coming up from Sela, near Sela or just before Sela.
OKSRT, then
Yes.
beyond.
OKSRT, of course, is coming to Tenga.
From Shergarh, Morsing,
And then going
Mandala,
on the western,
going to
on the
Siala, west of
from
Siala
Mandala,
Pass.
west of Siala, Sela Pass. Now that will also help, I guess, in terms of mobilization or deployment, right?
Absolutely, it gives you great flexibility. You cannot depend on one main axis.
Right.
Always you need a alternate one. And it gives a great flexibility.
Sure.
And it's all with great thought that one has really planned it, because it all takes a lot of investment in terms of money and resources. So therefore, it is a very well thought out one to have an alternate access.
So what about Bhutan? I mean, you were saying that we will speak about Bhutan later. So tell us about, what role can Bhutan or Bhutan border play in this? Because in 62 we have heard stories about our soldiers who were outnumbered at Sela coming through Bhutan, coming to Rangia or coming down to Assam. Is that still available? Is there a kind of alternate route there through Bhutan also?
Yes, if you look at the complete Tawang district, that is from Sela, all the rivers flow westwards.
Towards Bhutan.
Towards Bhutan. And finally, the Tawang Chu joins and then it flows on to Bhutan.
Right.
So the grain of the country is in that direction. And the eastern Bhutan bordering Tawang is amenable for a easy exit towards Samdrup Jonkar and then to your Tamilpur and that area, So while this geographically it is very well aligned, but the equation between Bhutan and us, we are a very friendly country. It's on mutual respect
Security
to each other,
and
the trust that we have and the people-to-people contact that we have. And the treaty between Indo-Bhutan Treaty of 2007, March, which was signed, in Article 2 it very clearly states that neither of the country will use their territory for any activity which impinges on the national security and national interest. So if you look at this very closely, Bhutan, both eastern and the western extremity, eastern with Tawang and the west with the Sikkim, the Gangtok, it both is amenable for a thrust taking in Bhutan by the China.
Yes.
In Tawang also coming from the north through the Rong Mela axis, which he is trying to do something, and coming across the Thrash Yangtze and Trashigong, which is joining the Tawang sector, Lumla. As you rightly mentioned, in 62, most of them made an exit through that.
Yes, exactly.
And of late, if you see the southern part of the Tawang district, which I mentioned, it borders the Sakteng Wildlife Sanctuary.
That's right.
Which all of out of the blue, the China is claiming it. It is absolutely ridiculous without any basis. He's suddenly claiming it. So I think he's claiming it without. It's not without any reason. We need to really take note of it. But I would say that the relations between Bhutan and India are really strong and based on very, very mutual respect and trust with the both at all the levels, whether it is the people to people or the fledgling democracy with our largest democracy, or the monarchy and the senior leadership here and the one who have gone by. I think we have a very good equation. In a situation like this Article 2 permits a mutually an arrangement where the security of whether India is threatened or the Bhutan is threatened. So we will come to an arrangement. I'm sure it will work out based on the situation that develops.
It's very reassuring.
Very
reassuring. Jal Narayanan, you said you will speak about Myanmar, North Myanmar. Let us understand from you the importance of that tri-junction. India, China, Myanmar, for Eastern Arunachal Pradesh.
Yes, in the Eastern Arunachal, the easternmost place of India is at a village is called Kibitu, which is, by the way, closer by air to Beijing than to Delhi. That is the easternmost point. From there, when you go a little southeast, comes the main Tri-junction point, which is acceptable by both India and Myanmar, which is a pass called Jelepla.
Right.
And next to Jelepla is the Tri-junction. The Chinese don't accept that, and they want to come further in towards much further in, about 8-10 kilometers inside. So that is where the problem area lies. But the bigger problem is that North Myanmar has never been under the control of the government, whether in Rangoon and now in Naypyidaw. It's full of insurgent groups, and there's a lot of insurgent groups of the northeast who had gone there. The valley-based insurgent groups, whether you take ULFA, NSCN, IM, NSCN, K, they all have their bases there, plus you have their own militant bases. And right across, when you go through the old Burma Road, which starts from India, ahead of Margarita, Lido, and then goes to the Pangso Pass. And then the main route where it starts from is from the last junction railway station, which is Lekhapani. From Lekhapani to Margarita to Lido, then crosses the Pangsau Pass, and through the northern Myanmar, it goes into, from Myitkyina, it goes into China,
Yes.
which was made during the Second World War.
That's right.
For support, but well, by
Which
the
is
time
called
it
the
finished,
Stilwell Road.
yes, Stilwell Road,
Yeah.
and which linked the old Burma Road.
Right.
But of course, the battle finished before that.
Yes.
So this area has always been under the influence of the Chinese. In fact, just across the border in Bhamo, there is a place called Ruili, and you will find all their headquarters of all these
Insurgent groups are there,
insurgent
yes.
groups there. So this is the area which you always felt that since it is not in control of the Myanmar government, China could very well come in through this area to circumvent all the defenses that we have. But now the dispensation has changed in Myanmar and relations are much better. We also have our plans to make sure that negate this. So the 11th plan raisings and all has given us that capability to negate this route. So that is where the problem comes in, and the instability in Upper Assam and the Mizoram and other Manipur and other places stems from people who come from here.
That's right. No, that's something which we have to look at. But final question to both of you, but to you, General Anbu, first. A lot of people think that because Arunachal was the main place where the battle took place, especially in Kameng, and we were outnumbered and outmaneuvered there. A lot of people don't know our deployments, and we don't need to get into details of deployments, but someone like you who has been the vice chief and who has been sort of corps commander there, people would like to know what is our preparedness there, what is our deployment, is it adequate, are we sufficiently deployed there in numbers to take on any Chinese ingress or Chinese misadventure, if you want to call that.
Yeah, before I come to this, your question, I want to talk about how the Tawang Bowl is. You have the Tawang Chu at the south, Nyamjang Chu to the west, where in 62 he had come down, and on the east is the Mago Chu, which comes down from Tulungla.
Right.
This is a very small ball. If I have to tell you, it's about 45 by 25 kilometers. And you have to defend this. And we hold the watershed.
Right.
Many of them don't know. Yes, Thagla, he's taken it in 62, fine. But we have a ridge immediately south of Namkachu, which is the Hatunga Ridge, coming down from your Karpola and then to Hatunga. It's also called the Nilia Ridge.
Right.
And on the eastern side, he took the ridge immediately north of Samdrang Chu.
Right.
And we have a ridge on the south, Lungrola and the Sulula Ridge.
Right.
Thereafter, all the rest of the watershed is with us. We dominate the LAC here. For us to defend this, resources wise, we are very adequate, and the communication is very good. We are able to build up forces, mobilize in faster time frame. Yes, the battles have to be fought in the second stage.
Right.
So the troops need to be acclimatized in this. But you think of the adversary. While of all the sectors in the northern border, this is the place where Lhasa is the closest. And the terrain is relatively easy, open, rolling terrain, but it's of course at 14,000 feet. So he comes from Lhasa to Shannon, that's on the Sangpo River, and then he comes down south approaching the Tawang sector. So he has to build up all this way in this open terrain. We are in a position to observe and interdict his movement. Plus, within this restricted bowl which I mentioned, I think finally it will boil down to the leadership and the element of offensiveness in the troops. You cannot defend a bowl which is very small by being just defensive.
Right.
You need to use all your resources
In
to
an
be
offensive
very
manner.
offensive manner in this. That's a key.
And that's where our troops, I think, will have the advantage, as we saw at Galwan.
Absolutely.
And
I have no doubt we are well poised. We are on the starting block.
Very, very reassuring once again. General Narayanan, on the eastern and the rest of Arunachal Pradesh, there are some gaps in our deployment, I suppose, that we know in public domain. But even that is now being made up, and now that the communication has improved, all that has happened. And the change of orbit about 10 years ago, where 3 Corps is now looking at Eastern Arunachal Pradesh. Does that help in terms of deployment and offensive elements?
Hell of a lot, because earlier only 2 div was there, you have 56 div.
Right.
You have available, and you have every corps has its own reserves available.
Right.
To give a brief on rest of Arunachal, there are total of 68 passes along the LAC and the IB.
Right.
Out of that, only 7 are perennial.
Rest get
Three are permanently snowbound.
I
So
see.
they are super high altitude, permanently snowbound. Rest are seasonal. So he gets restricted because of these. Because right from the beginning, when our deployment initially stages through the 80s and 90s and early 2000, when we were not that strong, the concentration had always been that to make sure that the perennial passes he can never use. So that he is restricted to the seasonal passes, and so he has to wait for the season the pass to open and come, and he is restricted once the passes close. But subsequent to the 11th and 12th plan raising and the infrastructure having come up, today you are in a position to do QPQ. For example, like I mentioned,
quid
pro quo.
Yeah.
Like the Lohit sector, he had come right up to Wolong. Today, from there, the southern loop of the Eastern Highway has a main junction point called Rao. If adequate resources are given, you can go there. But I go by what General Anbu said. Here in mountain warfare is not slugging head on, it's a battle of maneuver.
Right.
I am from Armored Corps. I understand that concept of maneuver. We do the same thing. Block him at one place, hit him from a flank from some other place. He can't be everywhere.
Right. He doesn't have
He
that
doesn't
kind of
have
resources.
that kind of resources and luxury. So he might come somewhere. You have adequate resources to block him. Now you maneuver elsewhere. So here you will be able to give the Indians a strong quantum of PWs of the Chinese, whom you will be able to surround and capture.
That's good to know. So 58 years after the 1962 war, and of course in the wake of what new tensions that we see with China along the LAC, both in Ladakh and in some parts of Sikkim, we have from 2 very experienced people who have dealt with the troops on the ground, have led Indian troops on the ground, a very reassuring picture of what India is capable of, not just holding its own in those areas of Arunachal Pradesh, but also giving as good as it gets to the Chinese if a conflict begins or is initiated by the Chinese in coming years or coming a decade or so. So on that note, I want to end this episode of Strategic Insight. We will come back to you with more such episodes on different sectors like Sikkim, like western sector, that is Ladakh, and then look at some of the maritime components also. Until the next time, it's goodbye, but till then, don't forget to like us on our different social media handles, and also keep sending feedback on our various platforms. The emails are available, and I will see you the next time. Until the next time, it's goodbye. Hello and welcome. You're on Strategic Insights, 5th edition on StratNews Global. I'm Nitin Gokhale. On this edition, we are going to discuss the maritime dimension to the China challenge that India faces, and of course, the larger geostrategic construct. And to discuss the larger maritime construct and the competition between India and China in probably Indian Ocean region and South China Sea, I'm joined by Vice Admiral Satish Soni to my right. He's been the Commander-in-Chief of the Eastern Naval Command. And of course, to my left, Major General Rajiv Narayanan, who's the faculty member at the USI, with whom we are doing this series of discussions on the China challenge. Welcome both of you to this program. If I can turn to you, Admiral Soni, what is the main China challenge for India in the maritime domain, especially in Indian Ocean region?
You see, for the first time, the Chinese Navy, we call it the CCP Navy now, entered the Indian Ocean. It was in 2008. So you can say that till 2008, they were really a navy which was operating in South China Sea and in their coastal waters. But in 2008, for the first time, they came ostensibly for anti-piracy patrols in the Gulf of region, in the Gulf of Aden. And we were quite surprised at that time that this navy of this flotilla of, 2 old ships, escorted by one logistic ship with the rusted hulls, was able to stay in the Gulf of Aden for 3 months and went back. So I would say in some respects it was an impressive performance. But gone are those days. They have continuously maintained a presence in the Indian Ocean now. The flotilla has only become bigger. It has added destroyers, it has added big logistic ships, it has added submarines. It has not only done the Gulf of Aden patrols, but it has thereafter gone to the east coast of Africa, sometimes to the Mediterranean. They have exhibited staying power of over 6 months, and followed now by presence of intelligence ships. And so their presence in the Indian Ocean has been registered. And as you know, it is on account of their dependency on trade with the Indian Ocean littoral countries. So you can expect them to stay. And while, we don't have any maritime disputes with China, but then we have a dispute in our borders in the north, and that makes their presence a little complicated. But more importantly, I think their presence in the Indian Ocean emboldens Pakistan. Because Pakistan doesn't have a very strong navy. They are a navy which normally stays close to the coast. But if they have this big brother navy which is trying to help them, as they have indeed tried to not only register the presence of their ships, but they had Hambantota, they had Gwadar, they have, Fedu Fenolo, they have presence in Myanmar, they have a base in Djibouti. So all this adds, to the final narrative that they are our maritime neighbors now. And, with the misunderstandings that we have had in Ladakh, they become a challenge to us.
That's an important point to make, that, everything is connected. It's not just the maritime domain alone. But General Narayanan, you study China quite deeply, and we have been speaking to you about China challenge both on land and in the maritime domain. the larger Indo-Pacific construct, which is now becoming area of interest not just to India or Australia, but also, of course, the United States has always been present. But now one hears that China is little getting a little alarmed about even the Quad countries getting together. But they're trying to bring in Russia. Or even today I saw some reports that India is saying that let's bring in Russia. How do you see that region or that playground panning out in the next few years?
See, China has a continuity of its strategy, and its strategy is single point: to come at par and beat the USA and become the sole leading power in the world. And the first step towards that is to control this region. Though we term it now as Indo-Pacific, China has still averse to the term Indo-Pacific. They still call it the Asia-Pacific. Primarily because I feel that if you give it the term Indo-Pacific, then in some way it brings India in. And it looks down on India because in this region, the only resident power in this region, apart from, of course, USA, which is an external resident power here, is India. And India has a totally different system of functioning than the Chinese way of functioning. And China wants to propagate its way of functioning. How is it doing? The BRI or the Ida-Ilu, one belt, one road, which I call it an octopus. It has 8 tentacles. There are 7 land corridors, 6 which were there earlier. The BIMC has now become the China-Myanmar Economic Corridor. The latest addition is the China-Nepal Economic Corridor. That is the 7 land tentacles, and the maritime tentacle, the maritime Silk Route, is the 8th tentacle. What is these tentacles? They have suction cups and they suck the prey dry. And the BRI is just that. It is a suction cup which sucks the country's economies dry. And that is where when you look at their strategy today, when you derive the military strategy of war zone campaign states categorically that it is not against a superpower. It's against local, that is the regional countries. And the moment any other superpower and alliances come together, it beats its strategy. It is not geared militarily as yet to be able to stand up to partnerships and alliances. That is why every time it refuses to do any deals multilaterally, it wants to do it bilaterally. That is its strategy. And that is why you find that they are very afraid of the Quad. And as the Quad goes up to a multi-domain coverage and becomes a net security provider of the region, it defeats China's outreach because there becomes now an alternate narrative to its BRI which would be available. And like you pointed out lately, though I don't think Russia may like to join into the Quad, and that is why today morning I was reading that India has proposed
a trilateral.
India, Japan and Russia.
Yeah.
And Russia has become very, I would say, of late, Putin has become angry. I won't say Russia. Putin has become angry with Xi on 2-3 issues. When Indians had spoken to him about the Ladakh issue, what is leaking out now is that he had assured that little bit concessions here and there and it will peter out. It didn't. Then when they celebrated the Vladivostok Day, the Chinese laid a claim on Vladivostok. So that is the reason, background to why he today is not keen to give out the S-400 so easily to China. That said, we need to keep a very careful watch on China. When you read their Science of Military Strategy of 2013, which was released by the Academy of Military Sciences, which controls the strategic thinking of the Chinese military. It's a very interesting thing. For the first time ever, from active defense, which was propounded by Mao, that is, you would be defensive at the grand strategy level, but you would be offensive, coin any incident and become offensive at the military level, local level. They now have brought in a term called forward defense. And in forward defense, we have very clearly said that they are going to increase the battle space in air, in land, in sea, in space, and of course, cyber, there is no space, boundaries. So how are they planning to do that? It is like what the Admiral had mentioned, like what you have in Djibouti, Gwadar, what they're wanting to do in Hambantota, they have not yet done, and what they're wanting in Myanmar. This, they have coined a phrase called overseas strategic strong points. They do not want to use the word military bases. They find it imperialistic, but the overseas strategic strong points are nothing less. And in their strategy, they have very clearly said that it is these strategic strong points which will provide them the depth to their frontiers, whether it be maritime frontiers, whether it be continental frontiers.
Exactly.
So there is a scope, reason to suspect that given at a point in time, over these 7 continental corridors that are there, you will also find overseas strategic strong points to protect their assets out there.
Right.
So it is with this reach that they want to come here, and which is why they are scared of the Quad. That this reach will get defeated because it is not yet reached.
But that's a fair point. But Admiral Soni, you spoke about a little bit about Pakistan-China nexus in the maritime domain. But do you see a potential for that collusivity to grow and also draw in some Gulf states, maybe in that kind of a thing? Because if China wants to extend its influence in Indian Ocean region towards the Western Indian Ocean region also, do they need more support, or will they use what they are doing right now?
You see, they will certainly need more support. You know, the Chinese Navy has been expanding at an exponential rate in the last 15 years. In fact, just a few days back, there's a Department of Defense report which says in the last 15 years, the Chinese have added 119 ships under, some listed categories. And interesting, it is to note that the US has declined by 125 ships in the same category. I mean, that's not to say that they're already matching. They may be adding to the numbers, but in terms of technology, training, human resource, doctrines, etc., the US Navy is, far ahead. But then they have so much
tradition.
And then they have, more responsibilities also. But what I was getting at is that after some time, they will be able to spare more ships for the Indian Ocean, right? They would be able to spare more long-range maritime patrol aircraft for the Indian Ocean. They would be able to spare UAVs, for surveillance. And these bases, which they are logistic strong points, which they have, they are not so reliable because they, these countries can always be pressurized, whether it is Djibouti or it is
Hambantota or Chakpu.
But one area which country which cannot be pressurized and which is, beholden to China is Pakistan. That is where their importance lies.
Right.
So you can see that after 5 to 10 years, Gwadar is certainly going to be a base which is going to be at China's beck and call. There are going to be strategic communication facilities. There are going to be basing facilities, repair facilities. Ships are going to be based there. And you might have the first Chinese overseas command, the Indian Ocean Command, based out of Gwadar. Now, for China, Indian Ocean is very important for obvious reasons. I won't go into details. But in the Indian Ocean itself, the regions which are, or the sub-regions become important is, one is the Gulf, for the fossil fuels that they give. And the second region is the East African region, from where much of their trade from Africa flows. So they need to dominate those approaches. And so they need long legs, And then what is important to them is Indonesia and the choke points through which their trade is going to flow. So this is what you can see that they are going to concentrate in. And the area around the Gulf, and we see these moves they are making in Iran. They might fructify, and we countries may have ourselves to blame for that. So you can expect China-Pakistan nexus to only improve. Pakistan is buying some ships. They are only 4 in number and they are really not the very high end. They are also buying submarines from them, which will start coming in from 2023. So while by itself, Pakistan, I don't think, is more than a pinprick for us. But together with the CCP Navy, I think that they can, become a force to reckon with. In relative terms, I would say, because till now, we've never had any opposition in the Indian Ocean region. And suddenly we have this big neighbor and a big neighbor with, a smaller
Deep pockets
Pakistan.
and deep pockets.
Correct.
But I'll come back to you on what should be India's maritime response. But generally speaking about the larger construct again, India has tried to have, I won't say alliances, but improved relationships with the littorals. I mean, there are these Western Indian small nations like Seychelles, Mauritius, Madagascar, and Maldives, of course. So, how does India respond to that in the geostrategic construct? And maritime, I'll ask Admiral, but in the geostrategic construct, what would be your assessment?
See, while you may be able to reach out to them, I would just take a step back and say that in 2017, the ADB had taken out a report on the quantum of money required for sustainable development goals, 15 of now 17 of them, which the UN had laid out in 2015. And in 2017 February, they had said what is required is close to $30 trillion is what is required. So while you may reach out with what? Every country wants money and infrastructure development. So that is where I keep saying, when I write or when I speak in any forum, I keep telling of, you have to partner with like-minded countries to be able to provide an alternate to these countries. Ultimately, after all, these are also democratic countries and they are answerable to the people. And if there is no development, that politician is going to lose his chair. And to save his chair, if Chinese are ready to give him money, so be it. He'll take it from them. You cannot say that, okay, don't take money from China and not give him anything in return. And hence, even with the Japanese, when I have spoken to, when they had come here, I had recommended to them that they have to make a Quad multi-domain, expand the Quad as the multi-domain and subsume everything that you are bringing in. Even with the Americans, I tell them that you have a Build Act. Build Act is 60 billion. What is 60 billion when China has gone around and promised close to $2 to $3 trillion? 60 billion is a drop. But when everybody joins together, then as they say in Hindi, boond boond se ghat bhare. So you will have something, may not be equal to what the Chinese are, but then at least he has something to show and you have an alternative.
Certainly, and that is something, that sentiment I have come across, at least in Sri Lanka. The new president of Sri Lanka, or not so new president, but someone who got elected last year in November, he's constantly saying that just don't curse China or don't curse us. Bring some alternative models or investments with Australia, Japan, Singapore, US and India. And then I'm willing to give you what you want in my country. But that's something that we have to think very hard, and the Quad countries have to think very hard, I think. But let me turn to you, Admiral, again on what should be India's maritime response. What should Indian Navy be doing against what is clearly now the not so distant challenge and maybe a competition in Indian Ocean coming from China, Pakistan in a smaller way, and of course the other countries like Iran joining in?
Firstly is my personal opinion.
Of course.
We talk of the Indo-Pacific, but I personally feel that what should be important to India is the Indian Ocean region. We must look at Indian Ocean region first, right? Do we have a strategy for Indian Ocean region? And if we have one, have we voiced it? How do other people view us? Whether it is Sri Lanka or Maldives or Myanmar, etc. I mean, they must have a very clear view as to where we stand. You know, in 2017, when President Trump came to power and, he came out of the TPP and he spoke of America first. China was very quick, and by June they had come out with their Asia-Pacific security paper, in which they very clearly warned, the smaller states not to get into a Cold War mentality, stop taking sides, etc. It was a very clear warning. Now, while I won't say that we should warn people, but there should certainly be some red lines. Our strategic intentions should be given out, and our neighbors should know that while we stand with them, and we actually do, Indian Navy does a lot for them, and they also they are responsible, for adequate responses. The second point which I want to make out is that one should not think that Indian Navy is a response. Maritime capability, maritime strategy is more than the Navy. You look at even China, they have a coast guard, they have that maritime militia, and organizing, your maritime strategy or people around you is extremely important. So we must give importance to maritime governance in the region. If you view from the eyes of, smaller countries, they don't like this big power competition. They don't like this simmering, they don't want to fall into
They don't want to get sucked into that competition.
Into any.
Yeah.
They are interested in improving maritime security.
Right.
They want to reap the dividend of the blue economy construct. They want to follow a sustainable development. So these are their problems, and this is, where we come in. Then we need to improve our maritime industrial base. This should be a whole of government approach.
Right.
Whether it is the fisheries, or it is the coast guard, or whether it is merchant
Environment
marine.
protection.
Yeah, there are just so many things.
Right.
I mean, they all have to be guided,
Sure.
by a maritime industrial complex strategy. And that has to be a whole of government approach. And it has to be an approach which not only meets the requirements of our country, but even those of our
Immediate neighborhood.
Neighborhood. So these are, I would say that some of the initiatives that we should take. The Indian Navy particularly, I think, we are getting very little resources.
Right.
We used to get up to 18%,
Of the budget,
5
military
years
budget,
back.
yes,
Now
yes.
it is down to 12, where the defense budget itself has come down,
And
to
from
less
that
than
again
2%.
it's shrunk.
It has shrunk now. We used to commission, even when I retired, about 2 to 5 ships, big ships in a year. Today, the last ship was commissioned maybe last year. One ship is due for commissioning this year, which has also not happened. You compare that with China, 15 to 20 big ships in a year, and big ships at that. We've taken 20 years to build an aircraft carrier. They've built 3. So there is just so much of a difference, which has, come into the capabilities of the Navy. And then there is an issue about technology, whether it, the platforms are not going to matter. What is going to matter is, the niche capabilities, that
The weapons that you
the
have.
weapons. Whether unmanned combat we have to be ready with,
Right.
we have to be able to, use space and
Even undersea.
undersea
capability.
maritime domain awareness. There is a lot being done. It's not that,
Yeah.
and we while we speak of Quad, it is important to give importance to alliances in the Indian Ocean region first.
Right.
And we have our own IORA and we have our own IONS. I think these are the two organizations which need to be nurtured, right? These are France, for example, is a very important
It's an
country.
Indian Ocean power.
There is an Indian Ocean power. So I would say that if we focus on our trilateral of India, France and US for the Indian Ocean security aspects, I think we will stand to gain a lot. And there is another issue. We talk of import of high-end technologies. Sometimes I wonder if low-end technologies are also important, because that is what our neighbors are using.
Right.
Myanmar, for example, we should be able to wean such countries off the Chinese dependence.
Right.
And they are the ones who don't need high-end technologies.
Yeah, they need
So
basic.
they need
equipment,
basic
yeah.
technologies. And if the US is unable to supply to them, they could supply through India, where it becomes cost-effective for them to
Correct.
buy arms. And so these are some of the aspects which I think we must follow. And there is another. We have a very good example in combating piracy.
Right.
If you see for piracy, all 5 Security Council powers were on one side.
Right.
Right. So while politically people were in different camps, but they were together fighting a common cause.
Right.
How did they manage to do it? And if you go into details, you will find that it was the navies which made
Work
it possible.
in unison, yeah.
Because here it was Iranian Navy helping the US Navy, warding off hijack attempts. South Korea, Japan, India, China, right? We were together escorting the ships.
Right.
We were on a common communication channel.
Sure.
And that is while politically there might be differences, but when a man is in uniform is given some task to do, he does it according to the standard operating procedures. That's a lieutenant commander doing it,
Correct.
reporting to a commodore who could be, from any other country.
Yes, exactly.
So ions, for that matter, I think is a very good construct.
Right.
We must, build on it. We must build on what it can contribute to maritime security in the region and IORA also.
That's again a very important point. But final word to you, General Narayanan. Apart from IONS, IORA, Quad, our bilateral relations with the countries around us and the exercises that the Indian Navy does contribute to the confidence building measures as far as Navy to Navy relationship is concerned. And one has seen that, like what he mentioned, that when the uniformed forces operate together, I think they have a different understanding. So in that case, what would you recommend? I mean, should India increase the tempo and pace of these bilateral exercises with countries around us?
We must and continue to do it. And I would go a step further and I would say that let us bring it all under the umbrella of the IONS and start doing these exercises. If Quad can have a Malabar, why can't IONS have a regular annual exercises with all these countries? If it is going to be, if some countries want to join together, why not have a multilateral exercise with all these neighboring countries? This is what will bring more, you can say, a set of feeling secure with us. And they would welcome these steps. And linked with that, if we can get to giving them the low-end technology and other things that we want to give them, all these builds up to providing them a sort of a secure umbrella where they feel that yes, with them we are secure. They are not coming here like an octopus tentacle to suck us dry, but they are there to help us out.
That's right. That's, I think, a point on which I think I need to conclude this program. It's a given that while India is seen as a net security provider in the Indian Ocean region and around, it needs to have more closer cooperation, maybe more closer exercises with the countries smaller and bigger in the region, and provide a common kind of challenge to what is going to be not too distant future, a bigger challenge coming from China and possibly its collusiveness with Pakistan. On that note, I end this episode of Strategic Insights. Do come back to watch another episode next time, and we'll bring you more interesting guests and of course their insightful knowledge that they have.